everyone, to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtisFirst Radio Network. All past shows are podcasts. Pick them up at ArtisFirst.com. We welcome your questions and comments. Please use DJ at ArtisFirst.com. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here they are, live in living color, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
Thank you very much, Scott. We are live.
Yes, we are.
You know, we always do this show without Annette, as is obvious to all our regular listeners. But that's a wonderful segue into this show's topic, because we are going to talk not about live, but in some ways about death. This is the show that just will not die.
Oh, dear.
And we are your hosts, and we are also not...
we're not going to die either.
We're not going to die yet. We seem to be dying a little bit right now, but we're not going to die on air. But we are... the question for the night, and we're going to spend the next, 50-odd minutes talking about it, is, are you prepared to die? And no, this is not a life insurance commercial. How much coverage do you really have? Or have you divested yourself and put yourself into Krugerrands? No, it's not that. But this comes. Just give it just a tiny bit of background. But this comes out of a very short, a little clip we saw from a much longer show. It was actually a beautiful roundtable discussion. I would say that if you're at all a fan of
Jordan Peterson.
Well, Peterson, but just beautifully. Beautiful dialectic. Okay, a bunch of very well-read, very smart people talking their way through a topic and just finding all kinds of nuances and beautiful things to expose and kind of explore the topic. And Peterson has a number of these roundtables that he's done over the years. But this very short clip really echoes a sentiment which is much, it's not original with Peterson, which is, in essence, and we've talked about this in earlier shows, but to sum it up, if you look at your life and think of it as just as of a piece, you have to look at it from the point of view that it is not eternal. This particular incarnation has a beginning and an end. And without dwelling upon it, once one reaches a certain age of maturity, you realize someday you're going to die. What allows us to get past that rather stark and sort of can be frightening realization is that we just keep it out of mind. People literally keep it out of mind. But every once in a while, you are confronted with the existential and ephemeral nature of your life, and that question, whether you shun it or kind of push it away or laugh it off or quickly move past it, whistling past the graveyard, are you prepared to die, comes up. But in the context of this little clip, it was really much, I think, even better explained. Peterson said basically, how can you, in essence, live if you're not prepared to die? If you don't put those two things together, you can't truly live unless you're prepared to die, because you're living, in essence, at the fullest, at the living towards the highest purpose, whatever that may be in your life. You have to take the risk of that. You have to take the risk of living. You have to put yourself out there. And death is, yes, there's a final death, but everything that you do, every endeavor, has that risk of rejection, that risk of failure, that risk of emotional or physical injury, and all of these things are shunned as sources of pain, but they're all in essence an acceptance of that risk of life, of truly living your life. So it was a very interesting way of couching it, and I thought that this would make a great, we're big into death. in one way or another, or in living your life, really.
Well, understanding that death exists, because many times people don't even think, it's not even on the scope that,
It engenders fear.
Well, you could possibly die at this moment. You say, oh, well, you're being morbid. Yeah, it's a reality. You have no control over that death. People like to think that they do.
Yes, exactly so. In fact, that's the fantasy, is that you have control over that.
Mm-hmm. And as always, if you're thinking that, oh, no, that's never going to happen to me, that thought does control you. You haven't made your field of interaction, the way you look at things around you, your foundation of how you're going to be walking upon this earth, you haven't even acknowledged that. You basically believe that, it's my life and I can decide what I want to do with it. Yes, to a degree. Yes, but you don't have control of everything around you. That's not what this place is about.
Yeah, I would even say there's a deeper conceit there. Is that really people spend their lives pretending they're going to live forever.
Well, they feel that the reality of death is too much. It's that internal rising of fear, and it's real fear. Because when you're thinking of a life-ending situation, it's real fear that rises in you. And unless you are comfortable with the amount of depth of realization, enlightenment, actually, when you understand what's real and what's not, everything you've been thinking about isn't real. But the end of your life is, just as birth is also real. So where does that fit in how you operate? Are you operating in terms of everything that I decide to do, I'm going to be doing forever? It's never going to change me unless I decided that it's going to change me.
Well, that live forever is inculcated into the culture from the very beginning. People always say the youth. You think you're going to live forever, right? And throughout all of advertising, everything's about remaining, basically controlling your appearance, controlling your, your path through life. The motivation for almost every product, at least in certain industries, is all about making you appear more youthful, or making you appear more virile, or endlessly potent. The idea that everything that you're wearing has to make you look fit and young and trim, and the appearance that you give everybody has to be that you're powerful and you're in control and you're in charge, and there's nothing that the world can throw at you that you won't be able to handle. And other people, the people who aren't me, all the people who aren't me, things can happen to them because they haven't prepared. They haven't taken the necessary steps. They haven't, bought Krugerrands or Bitcoin or whatever it is people are buying these days. They haven't sufficiently, got the right insurances. All these things are this presupposition of I'm going to live forever, because the alternative, as you just said, is so stark and so real that it frightens people. It frightens people down to their core. It presents you with an existential question. What have you done with your life? How are you living your actual life? Is it just this sort of unconscious, or at least purposeless, and in some ways meaningless existence.
It's a bunch of tropisms.
But you should define the word. But yeah, it's just literally, going from one desire to the next, or one pleasure to the next.
Yeah, what happens to cross your mind at that moment. Path of least resistance.
That's a good one.
You're just flowing along.
And isn't that, that's, Margaret, that's really a really good one, because the path of least resistance is also the safest, in some ways, the safest path. It's the path that everybody's doing, that everybody says is the right way to go.
Following what everybody tells you. But it's fascinating to me, because usually that flow in a culture or a society, it's just what everyone's talking about. They say follow the flow. Well, the flow is only encompassing what the next human wants to do. It's all human related. Instead of understanding that there's a broader flow, a broader state of being that is interconnected with everything outside of your conceived concept, your concept of the world, your world. How big is your world? Is it just, this is where I'm operating. I only know around here. And I'm
looking at your feet.
Right. I only know around here. And I'm going to, I'm just going to stay right here and just do what I've always done, what my family's always done, what the culture seems to have done. But it's, again, short-sighted, usually just not even beginning to touch your consciousness, your spirit, your soul, that which is the spark of life in you. What is life within you? Have you lived your life to define what your spark burns with? Because your life is burning as you go. Time is your teacher at this point. You can't control time. What makes you think that you can control anything else?
Well, that's great. I mean, I think people spend a lot of their lives trying to control time. But what you said earlier was even, I think, even more important. The fact that people want to, instead of living their life and receiving, let's say, meaning from your life, people come to a certain point. We call it this sort of a midlife crisis, to give it a name. You come to a certain point in your life where you realize that perhaps, what is the meaning of my life? What have I done? What's the actual value of all the experiences I've had? And people come up to this and they find that, I can't define it. I can't figure out what the meaning of my life is. Here I am just going along, and all of a sudden something rears up its ugly head. Perhaps it's a disease. Perhaps it's just a life event of some kind. Something which reminds you that, hey, Junior, you really aren't going to live forever. What have you done with your life? And that strikes such a deep chord, and it tends to bring up a tremendous amount of fear. And then we've talked about this in the past. The ego rushes in and says, "Oh, I know. Wait. We just haven't done all the things we wanted to do." So you get these ridiculous bucket lists, right?
The answer to the question, we just haven't done everything we wanted to do. That means that I haven't given any meaning to my life.
Any meaning to it.
And it's blatantly false, but people cling to that response because of the fear.
Well, and there's even this sort of sotto voce. They say, well, if I do all these things, then I can die. And sometimes it says, then I can die happy. I have to do all the things on my bucket list. And, literally crossing, it's like a list that we're really crossing off. And now I've done them all, now I can lay down and die. But each one, if you pursue this path, reveals a greater depth of emptiness and meaninglessness in those actions because they are not fulfilling. They do not, and this is going to sound funny, none of them prepare you to die. What they do is they put off and take the place of that incredibly enlightening, Margaret said it earlier, this incredibly enlightening realization that you are going to die and that your life is not only ephemeral, but it's short. And what does scarcity do? Okay, short economics lesson. Scarcity equals value. When there's less of something, it's more valuable. You are handed a life which, if you had gotten the realization early, it would have been, wow, I've got a life which I have no idea how long it's going to be. It's a precious thing that I have no idea how much I have. None whatsoever. Everyone tells me, oh, you're going to live to be 110. We have direct experience that that's not true, and we all know that that's not really true. But if you were given your life and saying this moment could be your last, and people say this trite thing, live every day as though it were your last. But if you really do that, or at least bring it into your mind, and say, what would I do today were this the last day that I could get any meaningful experience in my life? Would I choose to do X, pay a tax bill? Or would I find something which truly fulfilled me, like renewing a relationship that has gone somehow out of my life, or making peace with someone, or finding someone to forgive me or to forgive? These experiences, in so many words, prepare you to die. Not in the morbid sense, not in the sense that you're saying, well, now I'm done. You don't know when you're done. The point is, each one of those types of experiences, and we've said this many times, they put something into the eternal. They put something into your eternity bank because you're doing them. If you do an experience that prepares you to die, it's an experience which, we mentioned this earlier, it gets written on the book of life, okay? These experiences which you write upon the book of life are true and eternal, and they prepare you to die. Why? Because it gets caught up with this idea, well, what do you mean you prepare me to die? I'm not going to die. You don't know that. And the truth is, if you just realize that you don't know that, and you grasp every experience in true awareness and consciousness, and had it as an eternal moment to put into your individual, unique experience bank, then no matter when you might die, inevitably die, you're prepared. You see, that's the point, is preparing to die is not buying, another $100,000 worth of life insurance. No, that's not preparing to die. That's just being an idiot. What preparing to die is taking, well, not an idiot, but I mean, it's just a distraction.
It's a distraction. Because money you can't take over with you. You can't bring it.
Can't bring it with you. But what can you bring with you, Ma?
Well, the memories are the things that you bring back. And what kind of memories have you had? Now, most people will say, oh, I'm going to have really good memories, only good memories. It's like, no, you don't understand then. All of your life can be stored, the good and the bad experiences, in being written down in the book of life. In fact, I believe we said this on a previous show. Those interactions, those moments where you're living, truly living, become the substance by which it makes it possible for your name to be put into the book of life. The book of life is eternal. It's not ephemeral. The experience may have been ephemeral, but what was at the core of this experience? How did you respond to what was happening to you? Did you fall back into that eternal fire within you that knows that only love matters, care? Are you looking through the eyes of care, caring for another or caring for the people that are involved, the beings involved in this moment? Have you opened yourself up to the point where you can be a positive light in that dark moment? Those dark moments are the background by which your light can shine, or the light of the eternal can shine through you. There's no other way this happens. People take for granted when good things come. They don't appreciate the depth of incidences that had to happen for you to come up to this good moment. People say, oh, I was lucky. There's no such thing as luck. But when you come back to understanding that your life, the substance of your life is very, very important. And that substance is only produced by that incredible outflow of the human spirit in compassion. That is the substance by which you can prepare yourself for death.
I mean, the experiences are exactly that. But I think the point that you're making, and if I could restate it, is that in consciousness, in awareness, compassion is a wonderful example, because when we've talked about this many times, is that there's a very big difference between being sympathetic and being compassionate. To look upon the other who is suffering and know that they are you is the essence of compassion.
Well, you have to burn. Compassion is you burn with the other person.
Exactly. So that is, as I was going to say, is a being state. It's a consciousness state. It's so the experience that you have in compassion is an experience which is lived in that moment. It's a true conscious awareness of yourself, conscious awareness of the other. It's also a relationship, because you're in sympathy. You just say, it's terrible to be you. I'm sorry that you're going through whatever it is, and you move on. You move on in your unconscious way. Going on to buy some insurance or go, look at another commercial or something. Okay, great, sympathetic. I gave you $10 and I'm away. Compassion stops itself in its tracks and looks upon the other and says, "That is me." The lovely quote there, "But for the grace of God go I," because that is you. That is your humanity. It's another spark of, or rather another emanation of source, another spark of the divine, if you will. And so reaching out to another in compassion, which, by the way, Margaret does all the time, and it frightens me when she does it, because people come up to her and relate their truly pain, and it's usually sometimes something in the moment that they're even surprised in themselves that they're telling you, and you have this beautiful, I almost, it's a natural thing with you that you go immediately to grace and compassion, and you find this way to relate to these people almost instantaneously. They, as I said, they find themselves telling you things that they have been burdened with and it weighs upon their soul. And then compassion, which is what is kindled here, allows them to unburden themselves, because you see yourself in the other, they see themselves in you, and they realize that this is someone who will listen. This is someone who will witness and who will see me. Part of compassion is being with the other. Part of compassion is seeing them, witnessing them, being with them. So, to bring it back to our topic, the experience of compassion is something where, in essence, which prepares you again to die. In your life, you will be called upon to give compassion, and you have a choice. You can just give sympathy and move on your way, or pretend you don't see and move on your way. You will be in a position, absolutely, almost guaranteed, that you will be in a condition where you would require, where you would love to have someone be compassionate about you, to walk with you, especially on the last part of your journey, when you're not going to be, able to just shrug off and be powerful and be young and be all the illusory things that the ego says you're going to be and live forever. No, you're going to be in a state where you need compassion, where where your powers are failing, where your ephemeral form is fading, where your spirit, which is trammeled within a broken and fading corporeal existence, is going to burn a little brighter and look for the actual connections, the things that actually matter. Don't wait that long, would be my advice. Don't wait till you're in extremis, but that is when it will come, no matter what. You can start far earlier, and in awareness, offer compassion. Offer yourself in relationship to another. Be a being for your spouse or your husband or your children or whomever. Be there in your life, in every expression of your life. And each one of those, those exercises, those experiences, will be, as Margaret just said, written upon your book of life with compassion and love. And each one of them, in its own subtle way, will add meaning and will prepare you to die. And it sounds terrible. Everybody say, oh gosh, you're preparing me to die. No, you're living. In living without the terror of dying, and being without being afraid to be compassionate or forgiving or loving, which is really the basis of all of it, you prepare yourself to die in the best way possible, with a life where you go back, as Tecumseh said, and with a song that rings through the heavens, with your song of your life ringing through the heavens. It's not something you go in there, well, I had all the right, cars and insurances, and
I lived in the right neighborhood.
I lived in the right neighborhoods, and I never did anything my culture didn't tell me to do.
Right. Or my religion didn't tell me.
Or whatever rule set you're living by, and that's a life which, and those lives in the very end, people say, I'm not ready. I need more time. Sorry, time's run out. That's a pathetic thing. That means that you weren't prepared to die because you never took the risk to live.
Yes. In fact, I've said this before, but the way you live your life on a day-by-day basis, moment to moment, is the way you're going to meet your death. And Christopher, our son, had always lived his life head on, eyes open, always taking things in. He knew when something wasn't being told him, and he demanded to know what was being kept. He wanted to know so that he can just face the next day. And we didn't hold back. Yes, he was a child. Yes, he was 5 at the time, or 7, 5 to 7. But he met life head on. He didn't back down, ever. Ever. The unknown didn't faze him. He understood what it was, and he understood what it meant to be afraid. But he didn't let that fear take hold. He still moved forward. That story, when he was at the Cancer Kids camp, and they were in these little cabins. All the kids were divided up, and he was in with a couple of other young boys, and they had bunk beds, and he loved sleeping on the top bunk. So there he was on the top bunk. And the counselor, because each little group had a counselor, decided he wanted to give them the camping experience. So it got dark outside, and suddenly he started making noises outside the door. And they were like, "What's that? What's that noise?" And then suddenly little moans coming in, and kids are getting scared. But Christopher had decided, that's enough of that. He stood straight up on the top bunk and yelled out, "I'm not afraid of you. Come on out, whoever you are." And this is the story that the counselor had told me. His 2 other cabin mates were hiding, and they were frightened. And the one thing Christopher was always motivated by was getting rid of bullies. He hated bullies. So he fought. And he met everything head on, to the fullness of his experience. He didn't give in to fear. That wasn't his nature. Didn't mean that he didn't like, or he liked everything that was happening to him. There was a lot of very disagreeable and painful moments. But he soldiered on, because he basically said, "I choose. I'm not going to wait for it to come after me. I'm going to go after it."
And exactly that. Christopher's perhaps an unusual person, because most people would react like the other kids. They would be afraid, but if you saw, and this was our experience with Christopher when he had, probably maybe not everybody knows, but our son passed away from leukemia when he was 8, or almost 8, and the experience was, existential for him, completely changing, life-changing for us, life-changing for our family. In these types of circumstances, you are all the illusory portions of life are stripped away, and we can go into tremendous detail about that. And we wrote a whole book about it. But the point is that in that moment, or in that extreme circumstance, when you're faced with an existential threat like that, like cancer, or like any other life-changing moment, you still have a choice. And Christopher's nature was to fight and to choose to confront and to not back down in the face of fear. He was a very courageous. Naturally, his nature was to be a courageous person, to confront things head on. He was, I would venture to say, he was a bit reckless, especially when he was just a young child, really young child, very reckless. He would put things, he would take very little consideration for anyone else's feelings. He did not like bullies, that's for sure. But the point being is that his life, which was very, very short, he would say, well, it was, how could this be just? There's no justice in life, there's no
fairness.
Right. The word fairness or justice, but it's used. The connotation of fairness and justice is not quite what I'm looking for here. What I mean to say is that your life is your life. The expectation, the justice, the fairness is nothing bad will happen to you, and maybe a couple of things when you're in your 40s or 50s, and eventually you'll die. But don't worry, it's it'll be fine. You can avoid most of the things, and what we hope for at the end is we die in our sleep. This is all crap. Okay. All the illusory things that the ego or that Madison Avenue or your culture hands you about death is because it's driven by fear. Christopher, at his very nature, eschewed fear. He wanted to live life at the fullest, regardless of what anyone told him or what the rules were, because Christopher and people like him make their own rules, And then he was handed, a very challenging circumstance. We all were, but he was on the bitter point of the spear there. It was his life, and he was confronted with, this monster that this camp counselor was pretending to be, was nothing. Was just a pretend monster. But all those kids in that camp and everyone that we met on the ward, they were facing a real monster. The real existential threat of their disease or their circumstance. And every one of them, many of them came up to that with the final realization that being prepared to die meant living. Once you accept that, yes, your monster is real, that it's an existential threat, but I'm going to live anyway. For every moment that I have, you cross that little line. It's an invisible line, but you cross over from the pretending that I'm going to live forever and that I can control my whole life to realizing that that's not true. But there's something even better, something far, far vaster and better. You get to live every moment that you have, regardless of whether the next one comes, and you always get to choose what you're going to feel about it. Every moment of your life. And you always get to at least decide what you're going to do next. Whether it happens or not doesn't matter. So Margaret just said it. Christopher's nature was to fight and to confront and to be courageous almost to a fault. And so when he met this head on, the moments of his life became even more precious, even more filled with life, to the point where he realized very, very early, far before anyone normally realizes these things, that the disease didn't matter, that what might happen tomorrow or the next day didn't matter, that whether or not he was going through something terrible in this very moment, the next moment could still be filled with joy or with something pleasurable. That Margaret said just a moment ago, you walk through these things, and you walk through them with your head held high, knowing that this is the moment of now, this is your life, and you're prepared to die with every step. And to realize that, at the tender age of 5 is miraculous. It's also incredibly frightening. Most people we knew with that in their face ran away, and you want to run away. To be frank, the fear is overwhelming. But you find within yourself a seed of courage, and some people are born with an overlarge seed of courage in their very hearts. They're just born with courageous hearts. We know them all, people we know, but most people aren't. But it's there regardless. It's very near to the true you. Your true consciousness is fearless because it can fear nothing. It can't be destroyed. And it's courageous because it's literally the essence of your heart. It's the essence of Source. It's the essence of God within you. and God is courage and love and beyond all other things. And to be so in touch with it early, and then to be tested so desperately, and to realize that, yeah, it doesn't matter what the test is, and to overcome that far before he died, before any of us died. If you live this way, if you're prepared to die, you realize that death has no hold on you. There's a beautiful book called Death Be Not Proud, and it was another child going through a similar terrible, desperate situation with cancer. And the book celebrates the realization that death doesn't matter. Death be not proud means death didn't triumph over me. And, Christ on the cross gives us the exact same example. Death doesn't triumph in that story. I hope you don't think it does. What triumphs is the eternal spirit, the essence that is in all of us. Call it resurrection. Believe it or not, that's up to you. The point is that it's within you. And if you're prepared to die, you'll find it almost instantly.
Well, what it means is you must die to self. And he had died to himself a long time ago. Very young.
Christopher.
Yeah.
Yes. Interesting that we named him that. It was his name. But...
Right. But understanding that right in that moment, he crystallized the living in the now. That's the phrase people use for coming to enlightenment. You have to live in the now. Well, when you see someone living in the now, it's unmistakable.
And most people run away screaming.
The presence is absolute. You know that you are seen by that person living in the now, and there's nothing that you can hide from those eyes. So you must be absolutely true to yourself, completely authentic to yourself, no matter if you're making mistakes along the way. When you're living with a person who is walking moment by moment and living it 100%, there are no words. There's a vastness of being that happens. And yes, there's suffering. And yes, there's joy. But life encompasses both. And a human being is well capable of encompassing both. Sometimes it happens at the same time. And that is your paradox. This is what humanity has been created to experience. This paradox, where it is uncontrolled, miserable situations, but you find the joy of life itself in that moment. And most people say, oh, I'm wrong with you, if that's what you think. It's like, you don't think that, dear heart. You live it. When you live it, you are grounded in life itself. And you realize that this experience is eternal. And it is so written in the book of life.
The vastness that you're talking about is perhaps another way to put it is in the moment of your actual life, you don't care about death. Death has no meaning or hold upon you. It's just a point. And you don't even know when it's going to happen. And wondering about when you're going to die is a useless conceit. When you're living in the moment of, when you're truly prepared to die, death holds no meaning for you. you not only have discounted it, it has no power over you, none whatsoever. You know, if you're I'll say lucky enough to find that early, you live a life which is written upon the ages. The modern day miracle workers that we see, that we've heard about or see, people who change the course of nations, whose names are famous and ringing down through the generations. They didn't care a whit about when they were going to die. People say, oh, he lived for his art. Or like Mother Teresa, she literally spent every moment of her waking life pouring out love upon those who were loveless. And there are many, many other examples. The point is that they weren't worrying about whether they were going to die. Not even one moment. Not whether they were going to suffer. Not even one moment. The only thing that concerns you if you're living in the moment of now is, what am I here to do? You're exactly where you're supposed to be, doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing. Death may come in the next instant, but if you complete your task, it's not really an assignment, but you're there to realize that your place in the cosmos, your will, your actual being, the ability to choose is necessary. It's required. You're an essential universal component. However small you may be in comparison to the whole universe, it needs your witness at that moment. You just have to realize it. There'll be something for you to do right there. Something which will echo down the ages, whether anyone ever knows about it or everyone knows about it. Death doesn't matter if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. If you throw yourself into a river to save the life of another, and both of you perish, if you did it because it had to be done, because there was nothing else to be done in that moment except put you and the other in spirit conjunction, and know that life and your life were the same, and that you had to do what you had to do, regardless of the outcome. This is the other thing is, and this is very Buddhist, but you do your actions regardless of the outcome. It doesn't matter what happens. It matters that you were there to do it. The attempt is much more precious than the actual thing that is accomplished.
The attempt is an outward manifestation of the state of being in compassion. The soul is suffering, and its life may be snuffed out in this instant. I can do something. And you do it. And you don't even think about, maybe I shouldn't be doing it.
Or it's useless anyway. None of that.
It's not an evaluation like that. This life is calling for help. So you help. You do exactly what your heart is guiding you to do in that moment, but you must be in that incredible burning point to be able to take that step, because that burning point burns away fear. And the trueness of your soul, your spirit, emanates out bright light. I go. I do. If I die, I die.
And right, that's not even a consideration of if I die. The essential component of being requires that you are there to witness or to do or whatever it is, and you do it. And in the action, it's a completion. And in the completion, it's eternal. And in the eternity, death does not matter. You are prepared to die. You may live 100 years from this point, but it didn't matter. You're prepared because you've done what you had to do. It's
not your life. And you realize at that point that it's not your life. It's not a personal thing.
No.
Life demands this, and you answer because you are life embodied. So you dive in because it's the burning point. There's no gently putting a toe in to see if it might work. It has nothing to do.
Or you don't ask what the odds might be.
All of that. That's all ego stuff. It's like, no, life calls me for this, and this is where I place my being.
Isn't that it? See, the ego says, well, what are the odds? Or it says, well, no matter what I do, it's not going to matter anyway, so I shouldn't do anything. Or, maybe I should ask somebody. No.
Oh, the experts?
The experts. Well,
yeah.
If you're prepared to die, you're also prepared to realize that whatever grace is coming in through you is a clear channel, that you see everything. You see the moment of now and where you are. It's not that you see the whole universe, but you see your piece as clearly as possible. You see through all the illusions, and you realize that in that moment you have a choice to make, a real, present, clear, conscious choice. But you have to choose, and you can choose not to. You can choose to not fulfill that destiny and go back to sleep. You're not prepared to die. You say, I might die. Well, the action that is required of you counts not whether or not it's your last action. It is the completeness of why you're there. It's fitting your energy into the energy of the universe, the energy of being in that moment. None of us are in the spot that we're in because of some random chance. Yes, random things happen, but you're there for a reason. And you know it. If you ask your heart, if you allow the clear channel of grace, if you say, I'm prepared to die regardless of what the consequences, I will do what needs to be done, which is what every one of those kids on the cancer wards eventually realized, sometimes earlier than later. I'm here to live this moment of now regardless of what the next moment of now comes to be.
Right.
And if you say that, it's very much like the Bushido, or the today is a good day to die. Those things encapsulate the same essence. You live your life, the Bushido, one of the tenets is you live your life as though you were already dead. It sounds stupid, it sounds weird, but with that realization clutched to your soul, to your heart, to the core, then every action you do doesn't take into account any sort of fear for your life. You're just doing the stroke. You're completing the action that needs to be. When you have finished it, you may be dead, but you've done what you needed to do. And that essence rings so true. It's terrifying. But if you get past it, you're past the terror. You're living because you're prepared to die. And people know that. They know if you see someone who's prepared to die, if you're not going to match that energy, you're going to lose because they don't care about anything except what needs to be done.
Well, in that mindset, you were saying you clutch that close to you. It's like, no, there is no clutching. There is no holding. You understand that it is all an outward motion, and everything is coming right out of your center, your heart, and you follow through accordingly. Any time you begin to try to clutch or grasp onto something, you have to realize that that's your ego speaking. And I have to let that.
It's good that you're pointing out the word, but I mean, at the core, once you have that in your core, you no longer have to. You no longer operate from this ego portion of you, saying, "Well, I could die, or this could happen, or that could happen, or what if this, or what if that." It becomes a single, so perfect motion. It's.
You're focused so completely.
Hyper-focused, yeah.
Yeah, you're focused so completely on what is being required of you.
And were you to lose your life in that action, it wouldn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Death be not proud is exactly the same sentiment. In if you enter into battle without any expectation of that you're going to survive it, or what if I don't, or what if I do, then your actions become the pure intent. I'm doing what I'm called upon to do in this moment of now, and when the action is complete, if it's the last action, I'll never know it. It just will be the last action, because there will be no others, no other requirements. If another action needs to be is needed of me, I'm there. It's like, here I am, the old "here I am, Lord." Yeah, when you're called and you're given what needs to be, and you're the only person, you are it. You are completely in the spot. You say yes, and when you say yes, I will do it. Nothing else matters.
Mm-hmm.
If you complete that action, your life is complete. Every one of those actions is a completion of your life action. Whether or not you get another breath or another moment to do anything, another moment of your existence, doesn't matter anymore, because, gosh darn it, you've completed it.
Mm-hmm.
You've made a singularity out of your energy, and you're prepared to die.
Well, death has no meaning.
No meaning anymore.
It has nothing. For death to have meaning, it means your ego was involved.
Exactly.
There's no other way to put it. But life in general, this one thing we had always said, all right, as long as you draw breath, you have a reason to be here. Because death comes when it comes.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So as long as you're breathing, you have to realize that you're here.
It's what you always say to people when they ask you, how are you?
Mm-hmm.
Margaret always says, I'm breathing.
Mm-hmm.
And people give her a look if they don't know her very well.
Mm-hmm.
And they say, that's kind of dark. And I say, you don't understand. So if they don't understand, they don't understand. I mean, you don't make a point of explaining it to people. But if they do understand, the ones that do understand, they look at you and go, oh, I know who you are. I can feel your energy. Because I'm breathing means I'm still here.
Mm-hmm.
In this moment of now, doing what I need to do, but I'm prepared to die. And if you give out that energy, you'll find that life will hand you what needs to be, because it knows, life is not an entity, but you are prepared. So you give 100% into the action, because you're not saying, well, what about 10 years from now when my annuity comes due? I mean, it's stupid, but if you're prepared to die, you don't care about the annuity coming due. The action is now.
You are in the now, and you are living on the knife edge. And that's pretty much
The burning point.
Yeah, where we happen to be. Because once you start living on the knife's edge, there's no way you're going to back away anymore.
No, you can't.
And we have reached the end of our hour.
We're prepared.
Mm-hmm. So I'm Margaret.
And I'm Michael.
Thank you for listening.